Mr. Huxley, in your new essays, you state that these various enemies of freedom are pushing us toward a real-life, brave new world, and you say that it's awaiting us just around the corner. First of all, can you detail for us what life in this brave new world which you fear so much?
Take another book prophesying the future, which was a very remarkable book, George Orwell's 1984. There he foresaw a dictatorship using entirely the methods of terror, the methods of physical violence. The dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. But if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slavery.
You're talking about a world that could take place within the confines of a totalitarian state.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Now, here are the aims for the United States. 1, greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible. 2, higher and then much higher taxes. 3, an increasingly unbalanced budget despite the higher taxes. 4, wild inflation of our currency. 5, government controls of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation. 6, greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. This is to be accompanied naturally and automatically by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government. 7, far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at work to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states. 8, the steady advance of federal aid to and control over our educational system, leading to complete federalization of our public education. 9, a constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare, the beauties and the absolute necessity of peace, peace always on communist terms, of course. And 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself.
That's the John Berkshire case.
Well, Tom, I'm sure being a long-standing member of the Rockefeller apparatus and as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations of longstanding, you're fully aware that there is an elitist core in this country that has some value in subsidizing communism or protecting communism.
It has?
Sure.
You're accusing me of subsidizing communism?
No, I'm saying
because
that
I happen to belong to a
there is an elite core.
study group?
No, wait a minute. There is an elite core in this country that has dominated American society.
Well, I'm not one of
Well,
them.
let me finish.
Trilateral Commission.
A trilateral commission, Council on Foreign Relations.
State
Here's a
Department,
group-
I suppose.
Well, let's face it, they've dominated the State Department for 40 years, and pretty much openly
All right,
so.
but what are they trying to do?
Well, their
Congressman?
objective is to try to bring about a gradual transition in our society, a dissolving of sovereignty, and a moving steadily to the left on the political spectrum.
Now, who
It's
are
the
they?
belief, the elitist groups that I mentioned, particularly key individuals and policymakers in the
Is
Council
the
on Foreign
International
Relations.
Monetary Fund part of this?
Well, I would say the International Monetary Fund has certainly been set up for the purpose of facilitating that transfer of sovereignty and transfer of wealth on the road.
All right, we
to
elected
something.
Mr.
Let
Conservative.
me just finish the
All right.
point, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of unanswered questions. That you are looking at a group that has worked to bring about a dissolution of national sovereignty on the road to world government. And certainly you're familiar with local professor Carroll Quigley, who has been part of your club, in which he admitted all this. And he said in his book, Tragedy and Hope, the only thing I disagree is that we've worked to keep it a secret. You see Arthur Schlesinger Jr. writing way back in 1947, says, yes, this is the hidden policy of America. But we can't tell the American public because they're too unsophisticated to see the value of
What is the
it.
instrumentality of world
Such
government?
statement
What
is
is the
like-
instrumentality?
Of all the
through
things
which-
to say about Arthur Schlesinger, that's the silliest statement I ever heard. He never made anything like
Well,
that.
let me suggest that you read the May-June issue of the Partisan Review of 1947, Tom, and you can read it for yourself. It's called
Arthur
the Schlesinger
Schlesinger said there was a
Manifesto.
conspiracy. A conspiracy
Oh,
to
he didn't
promote
use the word.
communism.
Oh, no, he didn't use the word conspiracy.
I
He
think
said the
Tom-
objective
Oh,
was
what
to
kind of
bring about.
nonsense is
Well, let me finish. I'll tell you. He said that the objective, the secret policy, which we can't tell the American public because they're not sophisticated enough to see the value, is that through a steady result of erosion of new deals, we bring the American society steadily to the left, and through a sound concept of benign containment, we merge into the vital center of the socialist left. Those are his words, not mine.
All right, what-
So let me say it clearly. The United States can, must, and will lead in this new century. Indeed, the complexities and connections of today's world have yielded a new American moment. A moment when our global leadership is essential, even if we must often lead in new ways.
It is not our government, though you have to understand, that is doing these things. It is not our government that's failing us. It's not the Constitution or the Bill of Rights that's a bad instrument. It is a group of men who belong to secret societies who have infiltrated our society and our government at all levels and are destroying it and subverting it from within. The secret power structure says, as I've put in the first chapter of my book, right out of one of their own technical manuals, that a nation or world of people who do not use their intelligence are no better than animals who do not have intelligence, and thus are stakes on the table by choice and consent. They're absolutely right about the majority of people. Mm-hmm. One of the things that has been an illumination to me is that they're not always wrong. And many of their goals are the right goals, but the method that they're using to reach that goal is the wrong method. In other words, if you set out to create a perfect world where there will never be any more killing, but to reach that point, you kill 2 billion people, you have become what you're trying to avoid. And it can't happen that way.
This all may start making more sense when you start understanding that common citizens aren't meant to know what is happening at the top. Is there any dispute that to gain power in our day and age, it takes strategy and intelligence rather than brute force? Logic will tell you that in any sport or game, to claim victory, you must keep your moves strategic and secret. Why would it be any different in global politics?
When they've had a plan that's been in force since the 40s to debunk, ridicule, destroy anybody who ever talks about these subjects. And the public has been thoroughly indoctrinated that if you talk about any of these things that I'm talking about, you're just another nut. So the public, by and large, doesn't pay any attention to it. So in that sense, I'm not a threat. If the president had come on television and said, hey, this is what's going on, then they would have listened and they'd pay attention to it. But people like me, they perceive me as being just another loony bin, fruitcake, and nut, which I assure you I'm not. But that's the perception that they've been brainwashed into believing.
If you throw the frog into the water when it's boiling, the frog jumps out. But if you throw the frog into cool water and raise the temperature slowly, the frog will never realize it's being cooked. This doesn't always work, but it's an old metaphor that sheds light on the self-evident truth. Radical change is immediately noticeable, not just when it is radical, but when it is disruptive. But if it happens slowly and in steps, if it happens in degrees, eventually the radical change will have happened and we will not have noticed it at all. America was founded on the belief that our rights come from God and they're inalienable. But in reality, our liberties have been in the decline from almost the moment of the conception of this great country. Have you ever noticed that the government always claims that when it does these things, it does so in the name of safety? When is the last time you heard the government give, as a basis for its behavior, personal freedom? Some will say, come on, Judge, this is America, we're free. And I would say there are none who are so enslaved as those who falsely believe themselves to be free.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value.